Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we've got another list. Sorry for a little bit of inactivity the last few days. I've been down with a little bit of a bug. I don't really know what to call it because I felt fine, but as you might be able to still tell, I lost my voice. Strange, not sure what's going on. But today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 war games that are slated to come out in 2025. So, put more succinctly, these are my top 5 most anticipated war games of 2025. Before we jump into it, I do want to hear from you guys in the chat what you're looking forward to. I'm sure there's some games on this list that you agree with, perhaps, maybe some that you disagree with, and I definitely would like to hear some different thoughts. Also, I'm wondering if there's any games I might have missed. I did a fair bit of research in putting this list together, but I'm sure there's some stuff out there that I'm missing. We will be doing a top 5 strategy game list as well, so this is not exclusive to strategy and war games, although I think all of these games fit neatly into the war game genre. That's enough of me rambling. Let's go ahead and jump in. At number 5 on my list is Broken Arrow, being developed by Steel Baleka, and I may be mispronouncing that, guys. Sorry if I am. It's being published by Slytherin and Matrix Games. It is a real-time tactical war game, an RTS, that is very highly anticipated. I'll be honest, this is a game I've been sort of loosely following, but it's kind of fallen into the, hey, it's another game that looks like a Eugen system type game. And so I feel like we've had quite a few of those. We had Regiments come out a little over a year ago. That was good, but it didn't really move the needle on this genre, these sort of, Warno-like looking games in any event. It feels like we've had quite a few of these types of games come out in the last 4 to 5 years, and so Broken Arrow to me kind of just felt like another one of those. And I think Regiments did reasonably well, but it didn't really change anything in the genre. Warno came out, and I think folks kind of feel like the Eugen model is a little bit tired, and so that didn't seem to get as much press as some of their earlier games did, because it's kind of just a rehashing. But Broken Arrow seems to be getting a lot of attention. They had a multiplayer beta, and I think they had I swear I saw something that said there were 300 or 400,000 users who downloaded the game and played it in the beta. Now, I know it's free during that, but that's pretty remarkable for a Slytherin game. I think the Panzer Corps series by them is amongst their most successful games that they have published. And I want to say they sold 200 or 300,000 units there. Command Modern Operations is obviously popular, but it's very niche as well. So it feels strange to say Slytherin at the same time as a game where you're talking, almost 500,000 either downloads or wish lists. I'm not sure. But it's been getting rave reviews. A lot of people who participated in the beta, a lot of content creators who played it. Seems like people are really loving it. I don't usually get a ton into the multiplayer RTS games, so that's kind of why it's a little bit lower on my list personally, because it's not the kind of game I play a ton of. I play it with co-op stuff with friends, and so I would probably play this there as well. It's supposed to have online co-op, so I'm excited about that. Also, apparently tactical nukes all over all the screenshots and all the gameplay I've seen, which I'm sure is interesting. You don't usually see that kind of stuff. It is a game that is taking place in the modern era, so you've got F-35s, for example. It allows you to customize your deck of units that you bring with you into battles, with over 300 military units. It's starting off just with US and Russia units, so some of these games will have all of NATO or more nations that you can play with. Right now, it's going to launch with US and Russia. I do think the modern era makes it a little bit different. A lot of these types of games tend to be Cold War adjacent as opposed to, stealth. And I'm curious how stealth plays in a game like this. From what I've read, the developers are very interested in making a great gaming experience. I don't think this is going to be a hyper-realistic simulation. None of these games are, regardless of what some folks might pretend. A lot of these kind of very fast-paced games are not hyper realistic, and that's fine. It looks great. It looks gorgeous. It's definitely a game I'm intrigued by. It does have a single player campaign, which I'm also very interested in. They've shared some footage on some of their developer diaries of the single player campaign. It doesn't appear to be dynamic, which I feel like is maybe a little bit of a point against it. Although who knows, if the scenarios are well crafted and well done, that might be still, more than worth it. There's not much worse than a poorly done dynamic campaign, and I'm using dynamic in quotes here, where it just feels empty and unchallenging and like a little bit like whack-a-mole. So if it's a well-done campaign that's intriguing, I think the game takes all place in the Baltics kind of region, sort of that northern European region. They could certainly open up to more, but at least that's what I've seen so far in terms of footage. So that's intriguing. Like, it almost has like some elements of what I've seen of the campaign and the story behind it feel a little bit like Ghost Recon back in the day, in sort of their hypothetical World War III scenario. So I'm intrigued by it. I definitely will play it on the channel. And I think of all the games on my list, this is probably the most broadly anticipated game from the widest audience. So I want to hear from you guys as well. Like, what are you excited about? What did I miss? But that's Broken Arrow at number 5 on my most anticipated war games of 2025. It is slated to come out in June. It was supposed to be coming out earlier. They delayed it to get the release right. They're not doing early access. I think those are all smart decisions. I feel like especially a game like this where they're leaning hard into the multiplayer stuff, like if you launch a game in early access and it's not ready, it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. You don't get folks to come back to it when it releases fully, and you kind of... it's like a failure to start, if you will, a failure to launch, if you will. And so getting it right out of the gate, making it fun, making sure that the balance is right for multiplayer, like those are all important things. And I personally think delaying a launch to get the launch right is key, because then when they do launch it, they can focus on bug fixes without delaying additional content, and they can make sure that the experience is what they want it to be out of the gate, and so that folks don't leave frustrated with a half-finished product. I think that's a very sound decision. I've spoken way more about this for the number 5 on my list. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up here. But again, number 5 on my list, most anticipated war games of 2025, Broken Arrow, being made by Steel Balika, and published by Slytherin. And again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the studio name here. At number 4 on my list is Master of Command, being made by Armchair History Interactive. And I'll be honest, I went back and forth on whether this one should be 5 and Broken Arrow should be 4, or whether this should be 4 and Broken Arrow should be 5. I mostly put Broken Arrow at 5 because I feel like, especially with the multiplayer-centric nature of those types of games, it was less directly what I usually play and am interested in. Master of Command is a second game in sort of the Armchair History Interactive's history. Their first game was Fire and Maneuver. Fire and Maneuver was turn-based, and it took place sort of 19th century warfare. It has mixed reviews on Steam. They had a weird development behind that game where it was like, I think it was free for a while, then they put it behind a paywall, then they had some expansion. Like it was kind of it was a little bit of a confusing development period for me, where it felt like it was an early access for a while, it was free with add-ons, and then they got rid of the free and started charging for the base and reduced the add-ons. I'm not really sure, but Fire and Maneuver was the first effort of Armchair History Interactive, which was a game that is, at least the company is owned by the Armchair Historian, Griffin, on YouTube. Pretty large sort of history YouTube channel with a very well-done art style to the game. And I didn't play a ton of Fire and Maneuver for whatever reason. I played a little bit of it in beta. I thought it was interesting, but it didn't really capture me. I thought it was cool that they were doing like 1800s, like mid to late 1800s warfare, Franco-Prussian War, American Civil War, Bosnian War. And so I thought that the time period, was interesting. I think they had a lot of growing pains as a studio in their first effort to play, to develop a game. The reception was a bit mixed. And so that gives me a little bit of pause with Master of Command. Master of Command is going to be a game that looks at Frederick the Great's campaigns in the 18th century, so a little bit earlier. And it's intriguing because they've ditched the turn-based. They are going to real-time combat. I think, based on some of the imagery I've seen here, it feels like they're going for a little bit of an Ultimate General vibe, which I think is a good thing and could be interesting. Frederick the Great's not a period I know a ton about for whatever reason. I've always been very interested in Napoleon's campaigns, but for whatever the reason, Frederick the Great, who's like this Goliath of history, has never really captured me in the same way. I don't know much about his campaigns, but the Age of Musketry, if you will, is certainly a period that is interesting to me. I would like to see this game. I would like to play this game. I'm very interested in it. They have a interesting campaign sort of approach where, you've got multiple different countries that are advancing on Prussia on sort of the strategic map during this period of conflict. And when you choose a region that you're fighting in, the actual battlefields are going to be procedurally generated. So it's got an interesting looking campaign setup. The idea presumably is, hey, you'll never have the same battle. You'll never have the same campaign twice, because every time we do this, it's going to be a little bit different, right? You get a procedurally generated campaign, a region map, that is based on, real history, if you will, real geography on the map. But then when you go to fight, or where you fight, is procedurally generated. So, this is all taking place during the 7 Years' War. The description here is players are given 3 theaters to fight across in Germany, with each theater comprising 2 regions and 1 theater headquarters. Theater headquarters is contested once one of the chosen regions is taken. The player's army can't be in 2 places at once, so you must choose whether to confront a Russian force stationed in western Pomerania or Lustia before pushing on out the Russian headquarters in East Prussia. After each region is taken, the next one becomes more difficult. This continues until the 3 theaters, or 6 regions, have been secured. It's a little bit... the description of it is not super clear, but I've talked to, Griffin a little bit about this game, on Discord. It seems like they have learned a lot from their previous effort of making Fire and Maneuver. And I'm sure, it's got over 150 different units that you're fighting with. I'm just intrigued by this. I would say this era of combat is more interesting to me, Age of Musketry, if you will, than Modern Warfare. And so I think that's why it edges out to the number 4 place on this list. I also, again, in my discussions, I really do get the sense that they feel like they've learned a lot from their first attempt to make a game. And so that is encouraging to see that, hopefully they are going to be taking those learnings and building things out. I think the switch to real time for this type of combat is going to be appealing to a lot more people. I'm not opposed to turn-based combat, but I do think for this era of combat, it is more enjoyable to play these things in real time. I've always loved the art style behind this company's games, and even the YouTube videos, the art style is intriguing. So I'm curious to see what will happen. The first couple times I saw the way the campaign links battles through regions, and you sort of progress on a chain through the region, it felt a little bit like the way that battles were linked in Ultimate General, although again with that procedurally generated campaign, it's going to be a little bit less predictable, if you will, than some of the the other Ultimate General stuff like in Civil War. I don't know how I feel about that. I guess I feel like maybe it's one of those things where I need to see it to play it to understand it, but at least the combat looks intriguing, and I'm definitely interested and excited to see what comes of this. I hope they nail the landing. I hope they stick the landing. I hope it does well and is a good game. But yeah, that's probably all I have to say about Master of Command: Prussian Glory. Don't know when in 2025 it's going to come out, but I believe it is supposed to come out at some point in this year. So that's about all I have to say about that. At number 4 on my list, Master of Command by Armchair History Interactive. At number 3 on my list is Burden of Command, being developed by Green Tree Games, and it is slated for a Q1 2025 release. We'll see if they stick to that. But this is a first game by Green Tree Games, and it is trying to blend turn-based, sort of hex-based war games with role-playing. So they classify this as a tactical RPG. I'm curious to see how it is received. We played the demo on the channel. I liked what I saw, but the demo was pretty limited in terms of getting a feel for how the battles unfolded. I love the idea of sort of trying to build a narrative around, hey, you're commander of a company of soldiers in World War II, and you are being given objectives that you have to accomplish, but then there's the human element of leading people, and how are you going to deal with that, right? Like, it is a game that most war games don't do a great job of conveying. I think way back in the day, Close Combat tried to do an okay job of being like, hey, there's morale, your troops can crack under pressure. Sometimes they can go berserk and become heroes and, just go off the chain and go knock out a machine gun nest all by themselves. But there was never really the sense of like, I'm a leader and now I'm putting, Jack out on point to deal with, and then dealing with the fact that like, oh, well, Jack stepped on a landmine and blew his leg off, and now like I feel responsible that I put him out there, or whatever. Like, the war games are generally very bad at conveying that sense of, I don't want to say what it's like to be there, because I don't know that you could ever really do that in a game, but trying to give you the same sort of dilemmas and trying to feel like it's like it's a war, and like you're a leader, and like your choices matter, other than like at a very high level of, I didn't want that unit to get shredded. I have some reservations playing this game. Like, I think the turn-based stuff seems fine. The movement across the map, the way that different terrain features matter, seems well done from what I can tell. The like little text pops up on the screen of like your men like reacting to things as they occur on the battlefield, I think is interesting. What I will say is my one reservation is I like, as you know, in this channel, we've played Suzerain Rizia, right? Or Suzerain just generally. I like choose your own adventure type stuff, visual novel type stuff. What I wonder is when this game comes out and you're playing a tactical battle on a hex-based map, if at the end of every turn, and this is kind of how it was in the demo, if at the end of every turn, now I'm taken out of the battlefield I'm trying to fight, and I'm being presented with these narrative elements, I think that could be immersive and intriguing, but at the same time, it could be disruptive and confusing. And so, again, the demo was a very limited sample of what we're going to see. I don't know if it will be quite as frequent. I think they were trying to get people comfortable and familiar with the sense of, hey, you'll get these pop-ups and you'll have to make these choices. But if every turn you've got to scroll through 3 or 4 screens of text and narrative, that's going to, I think, probably be something that, even if I'm up for it, I don't know that most wargamers will be receptive to that. So this is it's very innovative, and I'm intrigued to see how it is received, because as an experience, I think it could be well done, but I hope that they do a good job of blending the gameplay on the hex with the story they're trying to tell. And I think it is possible you could go too far down the 2 separate experiences of narrative RPG with tactical war game and not sort of get that blend right, and it would feel very jarring and not immersive at all. But I mean, that's just my concern. This is a game I think I'm going to want to like. Again, I don't think I've ever seen a game try to do this in this overt a manner. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays, because I actually really liked the tactical war game elements of how they handle suppression, how they handle movement and terrain, and how those battles unfolded when I played the combat. I almost wanted more of that and a little bit less of the text. Which is funny because the hook of the game is going to be the text and the narrative. So it'll be interesting to see what we get from this. This list isn't meant to be every one of these games is flawed. I realize as I've been talking through this, like each one of these games I've been talking about, I've been like, hey, these could be bad things about it. That's not my intent. I'm excited about all of these games. I will be playing all of these games. It's just a matter of like, okay, so this is what I'm excited about. These are sort of my watch points on a game I haven't played yet on whether it'll work or not. But yeah, I guess we will see when a Burden of Command comes out. Again, it's slated for Q1 2025. It's been under development for a long time, and we did an interview like almost at the inception of the Single Malt Strategy podcast, which was like, it's like 9 years ago almost now, I think. That's not when we did the interview, but I think we did the interview like 6 or 7 years ago with Burden of Command when they first announced it. So it'll be a long time coming to release. I hope it pans out for them, but we'll see. Anyway, guys, that's my number 3 on my most anticipated war games of 2025, Green Tree Games' Burden of Command. At number 2 on my list, this one might be more controversial in terms of whether this is really a war game or not. It's a roguelike, but I think it's a war game too. It's called Never Second in Rome. It'll be a turn-based historical game with RPG elements, but also managing your soldiers' elements. It will involve like telling your soldiers, the units under your command, how to act in terms of, are they going to hit the flank? Are they going to attack up the center? Like, how's that all going to work? And so that's why I think it fits in here rather than sort of a different list. But it's called Never Second in Rome. It is being developed by Alessandro Roberti. And this is, I wouldn't call it the sequel, but it's the second game that Alessandro has made. The first one he made was A Legionary's Life. A Legionary's Life took place in the Second Punic War. It was the same kind of a game, except it really focused just on you as an individual soldier fighting in the Punic Wars and maybe one Balkan conflict after that. And it sort of followed an individual legionary soldier's life. I don't recall there being any command elements like you did. You did build relationships. You did equip your soldier. And you did fight tactically, but I don't remember you ever being actually in command of any soldiers in that game. Certainly not in the way that Never Second in Rome is billeted to be. So in Never Second in Rome, this is taking place during the campaigns of Julius Caesar in Gaul, and you are not an ordinary soldier. You are in command of effectively 100 soldiers, at least at the start, under your command. So you're like a cohort, or not a cohort. Is it a legate? You're commanding a section of a legion, basically 100 men in this force, and you're trying to gain prestige. You're trying to gain rank. You're trying to gain favor with Caesar. And so this is the same sort of roguelike system where, like, as you fight, you're trying to build up your character. You'll gain things. Your character, if it dies, like, you can't just resume. I assume, I've only played the demo, but I'm assuming each time you play, you come to the next game with a little bit more points to start off your character. But then it also manages, like, you've got to manage the staff, your officer's staff in your century. You also have to manage your equipment for your men, your training for your men. It does have RPG elements where, like, random things or events occur and you have to make decisions. But then where this gets a bit more war gamey is, like, outside of the, hey, I'm fighting an individual fight on a battlefield, like, when you actually go into a battle with your unit, your century, and you're fighting against the enemy, you've got to deal with, like, are you going to do an all-out attack? Are you going to do, you're going to hold your position? Are you going to be cautious? Like, how are you going to respond to what the enemy is doing? How do you manage your cohesion, your frontage, your fatigue of your unit throughout the course of the battle? So that's where that gets a lot more war gamey and is definitely something I'm intrigued by. I mean, to be frank, I think A Legionary's Life was one of my favorite games of the year that it came out. I think it was brilliant, especially for effectively like a one-man show. I don't know if anybody else is working on Never Second in Rome, but the game is slated to come out in February, so we are rapidly approaching that. I don't know if that'll end up being delayed or not, but this is definitely a game that is up there in my list for a reason. I think the first one was excellent. I hope the second one is even better. I love the idea of, hey, now you've got a whole, 100 men under your command. And so it's not just you as a soldier anymore, or as like in Heads Will Roll, where it's like you and a couple of buddies. Like, you're actually a member of the command staff, and you have to deal with, the lives of your men and their feelings and their perceptions of you, Caesar's feelings and perception of you. And I'm curious to see where the game goes. Like, late game, what happens? Do you march? Do you cross the Rubicon with Caesar, or does this never even get to that point? I don't know. But I am really excited for this game, and I hope it's good. I think I'm going to talk about this the least of all the games on the list. But let me know your thoughts about this one. I'm intrigued to hear. But it is a game I'm excited about. That's all I've got to say. So at number 2, in my most anticipated war games of 2025, Never Second in Rome, being developed by Alessandro Roberti, and it is the spiritual sequel to A Legionary's Life. And at number 1, my most anticipated war game of 2025, Task Force Admiral, a game being developed by Dry Dock Dream Games, and Microprose is the publisher. And when I was thinking about putting this game on the list, honestly, I kind of had to do a double take, because I usually don't like to do, for lists like this, for most anticipated lists, it is very easy to build a list with games that will not come out for a year or 2 years after you build this list. Burden of Command was on a list. Granted, that was like 6 years ago, but it was on a list quite a while ago. And so, I didn't include Burden of Command any other year other than the first year where I heard about it. And now that I know it's coming out this year, I put it back on the list because it's been, half a decade since we talked about it. I was kind of surprised I had not put Task Force Admiral on a list in a previous year. Perhaps I was just smart and realized this isn't coming out yet. But it does seem like Task Force Admiral is getting close, and hopefully will be coming out this year. They're doing a Kickstarter in like weeks. They say January, February timeframe. They have a page up. The Kickstarter is primarily, I think, to fund making actual physical copy of this game, as opposed to, just your typical run-of-the-mill Steam game that you can't find a box copy of anywhere. But just sort of a brief summation of what this game is. It is a scenario-based single-player game that takes place during the Pacific War and puts you in charge of carrier task forces in, a major naval engagement in World War II. They're calling it Task Force Admiral Volume 1, American Carrier Battles. I don't know if that means there will be a Volume 2. It is a game that takes place in 1942, the pivotal carrier battles in 1942. It is going to be scenario-based, so you're not going to be looking at like a dynamic campaign, but it is, a tactical naval game during, the pivotal period of the war in the Pacific. And given my nature, I am very interested in the war in the Pacific generally, and so this is a game that is kind of right up my alley, and I'm really intrigued to see what this looks like. We did interview the developer behind, or the owner of the studio behind this game, for a single malt strategy episode. I know this has been a game we've talked about on single malt strategy previously. I think maybe it has something in common to Task Force 1942, which was I believe that was what would you call it? Another Microprose game way back in the day, back in the 1990s. But, I think maybe that's a spiritual inspiration for this game, for lack of a better word. But I don't have a ton to say about it because I haven't played it. I think they have a demo coming with the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter should be coming soon. And the digital copy of the game, according to, I think, what they've shared on Steam, is my impression is they're targeting late this year. I don't know. I haven't seen anything official, but my impression is they're targeting later this year. So that's why it's on this list. We don't get a lot of tactical naval games. We obviously got Sea Power recently, also published by Microprose. That was sort of a quasi-modern naval war game. This will be something similar to that, but in World War II. And I mean, I'm curious to see, like, we've played War on the Sea on this channel quite a bit, and I enjoyed that, but the carrier operations are always the weakest part of that game. It's really not a game. That's a game that's designed to get ships in gun range and shoot each other, and maybe you'll get some land-based air or other things like that to deal with some air attack, and it looks pretty to see the flak pop up, but it's not really a game built for that. This is a game that I think, anyway, is going to be much more, catering to all facets of naval combat, in particular, maybe leaning more into the carrier operations side of things than many games we see that look like this. Games like this tend to do naval combat where you're shooting at each other. I think that might just be because that's easier, but I don't know. We'll see. In any event, I don't have a lot to say because I haven't played it, but I mean, obviously that's true of all these games, but I'm very intrigued by this. I've been for some time, and it seems like we are coming to the stage of this game being ready for a release, and that is an exciting prospect for me. So that's going to do it for today's video of, my top 5 most anticipated games of 2025, war games of 2025. At number 1, Task Force Admiral, being developed by Dry Dock Dream Games, published by Microprose, and hopefully coming out later this year. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your 5 most anticipated war games of the year, and I'd be happy to discuss those with you guys in chat. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'm out. Bye-bye.